Welcome everyone to today's webinar. We're very glad you could join us. We are covering today networking, presenting yourself in the best possible way. If you have questions at any time, please feel free to enter them into the chat box. And I'm very excited to introduce Lori and Carla, who will be your instructors for the day. Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Talia. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, Networking, Presenting Yourself in the Best Possible Way. I'm Lori Stickles, and I'm here with my colleague, Carla Fontaine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your interest in our topic today.
And Carla and I both work at the Center for Workplace Development, and in particular, we specialize in career development. And we know that and stress the importance of networking in career development all the time, probably every single day. But we know people frequently just don't know how to frame or prepare for networking opportunities. So we put together this webinar specifically to help you prepare and think about your next networking opportunity. So let's look at what we hope to accomplish today.
Very simply, we plan to define what we mean by networking and where and when you might network. We'll share some tools and exercises to help you plan what you might say when you network, and we will demystify the concept of an elevator pitch. We'll talk about how you plan for follow-up after networking opportunities, and we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end.
So I guess the biggest question people have is, what exactly is networking? And what we like to say to you is, well, the good news is that you already are networking, because everybody networks almost every single day. Networking is simply a conversation between two people, and it's an exchange of information. We often look for advice, for feedback, for suggestions. You know, if you think about it day to day, you may ask for a referral to a dentist, a referral to a mechanic. You may be looking for a new lunch spot. You might be looking to buy a new lawnmower. We are constantly exchanging information back and forth with people in a conversation, and that is networking. When we talk about networking with regard to career development, then we're talking about strategic networking. And that does involve a little bit more work. And I usually like to make the joke with my classes that work is actually in the word networking, to help them think about what you have to do to plan and be prepared for strategic networking. So let's talk about where and when you might network.
The truth is, we're networking all the time. I think we've all heard the expression, you never know who you're going to meet, or what a small world. Both of these expressions relate to the happenstance of connecting with other people and realizing you have something in common. For the purpose of our discussion today, let's talk about two types of networking. Serendipitous networking, which is random and unplanned and happens when you just bump into someone on the bus or at the store. And the second type is planned networking. This happens when you know you're going to see people from some part of your life or work history because there's a special gathering or an event. In some instances, you have a planned meeting where you actually took the initiative and set up a meeting with someone to get specific information. This is called an informational interview. And while we aren't going to talk specifically about informational interviews today, there are additional resources which we will provide at the end of the presentation. Regardless of the specific type of networking, in terms of talking about your career, you should always be prepared to discuss what you're currently doing at work. Let's talk about what you can say when you network.
So I think this is really the meat of our discussion today, because this is what people struggle with. What do I actually say when I'm going to be networking? So the first question is, well, consider, how do you know this person? Many times you're talking with somebody with whom you have an established relationship, you know them well, you know them a little bit through work, and you've already got some common ground, and those conversations tend to be easier to get going. Let's talk about those meetings with people you have not met before. You're meeting them for the very first time, and you really want to step off in the best possible light. So the first thing you want to do is make a great first impression. You want to come across as positive, approachable, friendly, and confident. And you do have to take some time to prepare in order to make that great first impression. The second point is that you want to keep your audience in mind. You want to make sure that when you're talking to them, you're going to say something that's appropriate given your audience's background. And thirdly, you want to create your own elevator pitch, which is a 30 to 45-second talk simply about who you are, what you can do, and what you want to know. And we've heard this term elevator pitch a lot in our society, and the origin of it is, in theory, it's the amount of time you would have if you step into an elevator with somebody on the ground floor and you're going up maybe to the third, fourth, fifth floor, depending on how many stops, and somebody says to you, tell me a little bit about yourself, or who are you? And this is your opportunity to kind of put out there exactly this, who you are, what you can do, and what you want to know. So that's our definition of an elevator pitch. Very simple, but it does take some time to prepare. So let's talk about how you would go about creating an elevator pitch, and we've got some tools and strategies to put forward for you.
To get started with the pitch, try answering the classic interview question, tell me about yourself. Let's take a look at the template for tell me about yourself. Let's think about how you would answer this. Some things to keep in mind. As you look at this, I have over blank years of experience in a particular role, field, or industry with expertise in functions or capabilities. I'm particularly good at, here you list your strengths or unique professional qualities. As a result, I have been able to accomplish certain things, achieve certain results related to your job. I have worked with, as, or for, and here you talk about your role or the type of the organization or industry, and I'm interested in. And this is sort of like what you're thinking about next. First, you want to describe your experience in the best possible light. So for the first statement, if you have over 5, 7, 10, or 15 years of experience in a particular role or field, you might want to make sure you are talking about how you've grown or dealt with changes or growth in the organization. If you have over 15 years in the same field or role, you might not want to focus on the number of years alone, but describe the depth of your experience. For example, I have expertise with or substantial knowledge of something. Second, when you talk about your expertise, you want to be as specific as possible. Rather than just saying customer service, talk about your type of customers or the type of service you provide. The same goes for talking about your strengths and skills. Name your strengths and skills specifically. Third, you want to talk about your accomplishments or how you make a definite difference in your work unit. Think about how your colleagues depend on your work in certain areas. Let's look at an example of possible answers to this Tell Me About Yourself template.
Next slide. Okay, so let's look at this example. If I were to say to somebody, tell me about yourself, this person may say this. I have been in my job for a while now, and I've been thinking that it's time to do something else. We've had some changes in my department with reporting structure, and I don't know what this means for me. Plus, I'd really like to do something more creative and possibly go back to school. Now, Carla and I have both heard answers to the Tell Me About Yourself question like this many, many times. And we call this kind of a stream of consciousness response.
Right.
This is exactly what's going on for this person. This is how they're feeling. This is what they're thinking. And it's also the kind of response that you might say to a coworker or a friend if you were having coffee with them or if you were catching up with them and they were to say, how are things going? It's not strategically very focused in terms of turning this into an elevator pitch. So let's look at how you might improve this. This answer is too general. First of all, whenever you say things like something, it's very vague for your audience, and they're not quite sure what you mean by that. It's also very I-centered, and again, with a stream of consciousness, that's fine, but this is talking about changes in the department, and kind of the person is really worried and focused on themselves. And the biggest difficulty is there's absolutely no mention of skills, and there's no experience or abilities that anybody can kind of hang on to. And the listener is really having to do all the work. So what you want to do is you want to turn this answer to tell me about yourself into more of a strategic, focused elevator pitch. So let's go to the template, again, filled out by the same fictional person, by the way, to see how we could craft an answer to tell me about yourself that's much more appropriate for a networking situation. So this person has filled this out. I have over 10 years of experience in an administrative assistant role, which included a staff assistant and a faculty assistant role in higher education, with expertise in computer skills, particularly Word and Excel, PowerPoint, and I maintain a database with student proposals. I am particularly good at organizing and prioritizing work and projects and adhering to deadlines. As a result, I've been able to streamline our process for tracking over 200 student proposals from submission through a 4-month selection process involving 30 people from across the university. I have worked with students, faculty, department administrators, and coworkers. And finally, I am interested in becoming more involved with creative web design work. Now, it would have taken some time to fill out this sheet. So many times when you approach the template, you're going to be revising it, going back through it, coming up with very specific responses to the different questions. So let's look at how you could take this and create a different response to tell me about yourself.
So when we look at this revised example of an elevator pitch, it's based upon the Tell Me About Yourself template. Now, using the entire template might make your pitch too long. Let's look at this revised example. I have several years of experience as an administrative assistant and have steadily gained new skills, particularly computer skills. My ability to organize and prioritize tasks are key strengths. My coworkers rely on me to keep projects moving forward in an organized manner. At this point, I would like to do more creative work, maybe web design, and I've been thinking about taking a course to learn more about web design. As you can see, this person leads with skills and what they can do. She or he talks about strengths and specifically what he is planning to do. Remember to have specific examples of your skills in mind for follow-up discussions. You also notice what is missing here in the second rendition of the elevator pitch is the reference to the change in reporting structure and the vague generalities. This one sounds more positive, more focused, and polished. In addition, we have listed 2 different examples of questions you might ask at a networking event, depending on who you're talking to. The first question would be appropriate for a recruiter who's familiar with open positions and their requirements. I notice at your school or unit, several of the grade 54 positions require some web design experience. I'm wondering what kind of design work is required in these positions. The second question might work for someone who's actually in your field of interest. In your opinion, what knowledge of software is helpful? Do you recommend any particular courses? So after you've created your elevator pitch, you need to practice it and try it out.
Thanks, Carla. So as we said before, writing out your pitch, either using the template or then moving from the template to, I recommend index cards, 4x6 is a good size, continuing to write it out, and just as you would any piece of professional writing, choose the strongest words that you can. You I describing my strengths and my skills with action verbs, and continuing to work through that writing. And then you really want to practice giving it voice, saying it out loud. And I know this is going to sound crazy to some people, but using a mirror to watch yourself actually say your pitch. You'll notice sometimes your expression, if you're positive about certain skills, that's going to show right away. If you don't like talking about some aspects of your work, that may show in your body language. You want to be standing up straight. So again, you do have to practice this so that you are able to appear confident. And many people will record themselves. You can use your phone and sometimes get an audio and a visual of your pitch. And I know some of you are thinking, this is crazy. I know I'm going to feel really nervous doing that or really foolish doing that. I assure you, if you give it a try and work through it, you are going to feel more confident after you hear yourself and how you're describing your work. Finally, you want to invite trusted friends and colleagues into your practice mode and say, hey, I'm trying this out. This is a version of my quote-unquote elevator pitch. Or friend, go ahead and ask me the question. Tell me about yourself. And then you can give them your answer, and you can get some feedback from them. And then finally, you're ready to use your pitch at an actual networking event and try it out with people perhaps you're meeting for the very first time. So let's talk about where those events might be.
There are always lots of events, neighborhood gatherings, school events, in which you might meet all kinds of people outside of your work environment. Within the work environment, there are holiday or summer gatherings and lectures, receptions, and exhibits where you have an opportunity to talk with coworkers you don't usually talk with. There might also be job fairs or open houses where there are hiring managers or recruiters available to talk with you about their organization or unit. You're networking at all of these events. Let's talk about how you might prepare. First, ask yourself what you know about who is going to be there. Do you need to do any research online, looking at the organization website or looking at LinkedIn profiles? Be prepared at the event with resumes or business cards that contain your contact information in case someone would like you to leave your information with them. The resume must be up to date, proofread on nice bond paper with clear and current contact information. Think about what you're seeking when you meet with people. Advice, suggestions. Are you just interested in meeting them and having a conversation about their school or unit? Now you're ready to go to the event.
So the key to a lot of our open house or job fair events is you are going to be having a brief conversation, and you kind of need to prepare yourself for brief conversation. Obviously, you want to introduce yourself with a clear, confident tone of voice. If the person that you're meeting with offers a hand for a handshake, you'd want to return with a nice, firm, professional handshake. And again, this is your opportunity to appear confident. And tell them a little bit about yourself. So you might take a version of your pitch, tell them a little bit about skills, what you've been doing, and then this is your opportunity. If you have any questions, you can put out there what it is you hope to know. So general questions that are often good to ask and favorites are, you can say to the person, well, what do you like about your work at X, Y, or Z department or school? And in your experience, what makes people successful at your school or company? You might have a very specific question to ask this person. For example, how many people have, or do most people have, bachelor's degrees or master's degrees, MBAs, MPPs? Or you may want to ask about a specific software. Are people using a particular kind of database, etc.? Again, you would have researched a little bit about this school of organization and crafted a specific question that makes sense and goes along with it. So after your brief conversation, you want to have a good, strong wrap-up.
Good. So how do we handle the end of the conversation and follow-up? Some key points. Be mindful of time. You may have a lot of questions, but use your judgment and ask 1, 2, or 3 as time allows. Perhaps there's a line of people waiting behind you. Be careful to be mindful of that and move on. Always thank someone for their time and advice. And after you walk away from the person, jot down key reminders about the conversation. Include the date of the conversation. Sometimes during these networking events, you really have a good connection with the person you're talking to, and they invite you to follow up with them later. Or they might even tell you if you see a job you'd like to apply to let them know and use their name. Let's talk about some tough spots.
So Carla and I know, after talking with a lot of people about networking, that these are some of the what we call tough spots for folks. And the very first one is people will say, I am just uncomfortable with small talk in general. So small talk is stuff like the weather or sporting scores or, how are you? And typically this is, again, with people you're meeting for the very first time and you don't know them very well. So what we want to say about that is small talk is just a part of it. It's part of networking. You don't have to do a ton of small talk, and in fact, the more prepared you are to kind of put out there and ask specific questions, probably the less small talk you're going to have to do. A lot of times people feel awkward about talking about yourself, and we totally appreciate that and understand it, but remember, you are there to provide service, to provide an idea of the skills that you can offer to somebody. Always want to be thinking about, what do I have to offer, as opposed to just talking about what you want and what you need. The next one is about people who have unique names, maybe unusual spellings, and I know, Carla, you work with a lot of folks for whom English is a second language. What kind of advice do you give them about introducing themselves?
Well, I always encourage people to practice ahead of time and to try out their speech with friends. This is important. We want to make sure that they're enunciating very carefully and slowly, and we encourage them to have their friends give them feedback. Let them know if they understand everything they're saying.
Great. A couple of the other tough spots around networking, sometimes there's just no connection with the person that you're meeting with, and we've all experienced that. That's just the way of the world, and I would just say let it go, no hard feelings, thank people that you meet with, and just move on. Also, a lot of times people think, well, I have nothing in common with this person that I'm talking with. Again, just have a small exchange, talk a little bit about what you're interested in or what you have to offer, and then you can move on. And I think the last point is the one that I hear most from people when they say, well, I feel like I'm doing all the asking. I'm the one who's looking for advice and suggestions. What do I have to offer other people? Well, the reality is that networking is a reciprocal relationship. You don't know when it's going to be your turn next to be providing the feedback. It may be next week. It may be in 6 months. Somebody, perhaps the person that you're networking with, perhaps somebody entirely different is going to say to you, I could really use some help preparing for my next step or trying to phrase what it is I'm looking for. So try to be open about this and give yourself a break. I think human beings in general just want to be helpful. If they know how to help, if you put it out there in terms of what you're looking for, it really is how we get opportunities. We find out about good referrals. We find out about how to improve. So just give yourself a break on that last point and try to be open and think about the next time somebody asks me for feedback, I'm going to be in a position to be putting it out there. Anything else you would add about that, Carla?
No, I just think that's a really important point because I think we've all been in positions where we've asked someone for advice or help in terms of thinking about a career transition, and then down the road we're in a position to offer that same help to someone else, and it just really, what goes around comes around.
Right. Great. So we have a few resources. These are a couple of our favorite books. The first one is The Power of Everyday Networking by Patty Hunt-Durham. It's a very, very easy to read book. You can't see how thin it is here in the picture, but it's thin and very readable, and I actually use it in one of our leadership classes and refer people to it all the time. Very concrete and specific ways to think about your elevator pitch, putting out there what it is you can offer to people. The Networking Survival Guide by Diane Darling is a great survival guide. It even has in it tips on how you go into a room at a networking event or a job fair and actually approach the room in a way that's going to be most comfortable for you. It's a great resource for people. So next to our links to websites, Quint Careers, those of you who know me, I'm always referring you to Quint Careers because it's a very comprehensive career development site in general. And they have this article that I've mentioned here just really explains networking very similarly to the way Carla and I have, but we'll give you a few more ideas in terms of your own elevator pitch. And then finally, the Watch and Learn, which is right on the landing page of Harvey, is our webinar on informational interviewing. So if you're thinking that you want to have a planful meeting that you actually set up to go in and talk with somebody to find out a particular area or profession, you are talking about informational interviewing, and I think this could be a really helpful webinar. So I think we are ready for questions from all of you out there. We're dying to hear what's on your minds and what you think and what would be helpful.
So we're going to pause on this end for just a couple minutes and give you some time to think of any questions. As always, please enter them right into the chat box, and then we'll start going through each of them. Just so you know, a few of you have asked, we are recording this webinar right now, and we will have it posted on the Watch and Learn page on Harvey by the end of the week. Hopefully sooner, but definitely by Friday it should be up there, and you can access all the links and everything that's in the presentation. So send in those questions. We're back, everyone. We were just catching some questions as they came in. One that we did get come in, which we think is kind of interesting, is like, let's say you are actively in the job search, you've applied to a position, you're in the process, maybe you've interviewed, maybe you haven't started interviewing yet. Does the Career Connections event, does it still make sense to go?
So I would say absolutely. Of course, I'm going to say that about any networking event. So I'll say that right off the top of my head. If you have the opportunity to go and talk with people and find out a little bit about their own schools or units or where they're coming from, maybe it's not going to help you in the immediate future, but it might help somebody else in your own network. So
Right.
that's another way I like to think about it, is not only are we always gathering information for ourselves, we're gathering information for our own networks. So I think that it's really helpful to keep that in mind when you have an invitation to go to any kind of networking event. The other thing about applying to a specific job, which is great news, and we hope that you apply to a job and you interview for it and you get it, sometimes it doesn't always happen in that particular lineup. So you want to always have options. You want to have option A, which is the ideal, option B, option C, where you're meeting new people all the time. Carla, what would you say?
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's important to go to a networking event just to practice your elevator pitch. You know, the more we do this, the easier it becomes. The other thing is attending the Career Connection might give you an idea about other opportunities and things that you haven't even considered exploring. So it's a good opportunity, and we're hoping everyone will go.
All right, thank you, ladies. So another question we've had come in is actually about developing your personal brand, which we definitely hear a lot about online, especially when you're looking at online networking. Is that something people are considering? What is a personal brand? How do you make one? How does that work? I can speak a little bit to it as well, I think.
Well, I think this is a great question, and for me, a personal brand really relates to a couple of key words. Expertise, what is your expertise? And that part about what is your contribution in terms of how others view your work and your work with them. So that's part of the personal brand. So I will ask people, well, if I were to interview your coworkers right now, what would they tell me your expertise is? In one or two, three words. And usually the first things they tell me, that's a key to that person's personal brand. What do your coworkers rely on you for? What do they count on you for? Because your personal brand is only that if other people would agree and substantiate that. Right. So you know, it's fine to have your own personal brand. It really becomes solidified when other people would say, absolutely, when I think of Carla, I think of that too. So for branding, it's really about not only what you want it to be, but others kind of need to be on board with that as well.
Right. I agree with that. And one question that you can think about is what has changed in your unit as a result of your work or contribution? So this is really thinking about, because you were there with particular kinds of expertise and skills, something is different in this unit.
And something else you just want to be aware of is the consistency of your brand, the way you present yourself in person, who you are, your expertise, the way you present yourself maybe over email, over the phone, and the way you present yourself online, maybe over your LinkedIn profile. You really want to make sure that who you are and who you're presenting yourself as is consistent over all those platforms, because otherwise it can look a little inauthentic or confusing to other people. So we got a question which I am notorious for because I am terrible with names and faces. Let's say you run into someone at a networking event. You've definitely met them before and exchanged pleasantries of some kind. You do not remember their name or who they are. How do you approach that situation?
Wow, that's a great one. Since,
we've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. So I guess there's the time when it's clear that the other person remembers your name and you don't remember yours, and that can be really awkward. I always find myself trolling through my memory bank trying to remember how I met this person before. I'll be honest with you. I typically just confess right up front and say, remind me of your name.
Right.
And I will say, I'm terrible with names.
Right.
Forgive me. And I just say, remind me of your name.
That's exactly what I would do, Lori. You know, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names, but can you help me out here?
Right.
And I think because we've all experienced that, everyone's okay with that response.
Right. Right. What I would not advise is trying to guess, because I've done that before and had a terrible failure. I am a huge fan of name tags, Name tags are not always available, and they're not always appropriate. If you go to a large event, you're not going to be wearing a name tag. But sometimes if you're going to a class or you're going to a reception in particular after a lecture or something, oftentimes they'll have a table with name tags. And I know a lot of people don't like putting their name, printing it out. I love it because I just feel like automatically that puts the other person at ease. They can see my name's Laurie, and they may say, my name is so-and-so, or they have a name tag on. So I am a huge fan because that's a networking tool. Anytime you have a networking tool, like a business card or a name tag, just use it because it can really help you out.
And it can be really helpful if your name tag has your name and also the organization that you represent.
Right.
So people can see you in context.
Right.
All right, so we had an interesting question come in. It's sort of talking about, do you think or feel that there are any sort of gender differences in networking between men and women? The comment was made that we are all female in the room at the moment. So I was just sort of asking, do different genders approach this differently? Do different genders maybe find it more important? Maybe we don't know. Maybe it's the same.
This is a great question. I would say in my networking classes or in my classes where I have a networking component, that typically women will express greater anxiety about networking than men do. Men may be feeling it, but they're not telling me that they're feeling it. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know what that's about, other than perhaps maybe some men feel like, well, I feel really anxious about it. I don't know if I should be or not, but a lot of times there is a very clear difference. Women will say, "Oh, I'm just really nervous about this. I'm not sure how to approach this." And all of the strategies that we go through with a template and the practice work regardless, if you're a man or a woman. But I do think that for women, it's really taken us a while to kind of get at the table and to be comfortable kind of even saying an elevator pitch. I mean, I think traditionally an elevator pitch was a term reserved for men when we're talking about who was riding up and down the elevators and who was doing the talking. Honestly, it was primarily men. So now trying to get women at the table and feeling comfortable with their own pitches and kind of putting it out there, I think we're much farther along, but I think there still is a little bit of a more difficult time with women feeling comfortable about it.
Right. I agree with you.
All right. Well, we don't seem to have any more questions coming in, so I think we actually can let you all go a little early. We just really want to thank you for coming and attending, thanking you for all of the wonderful questions. They were very appreciated. We really hope everyone can come to Career Connections on June 11th. The page is up on Harvey. You can go and learn all about it. And of course, once again, we will be posting this webinar on the Watch and Learn page on Harvey. I'm Talia. Thank you so much for joining. Ladies, any final thoughts?
Thanks, everybody. Just remember, you really are networking everywhere with everyone. So that's not to say that we want you to be feeling anxious and paranoid all the time. But we really want you to be thinking about strategic networking for yourself, being planful, being focused, and, we've all had these experiences where we meet people and, 5 to 15 minutes, I hate to be overly dramatic, but can be a life changer.
Right.
When you meet people and you have that connection and that opportunity to talk. So I really hope that you can make the most of it.
Yeah, and I would just encourage you to use this template to put down on paper, to really think through what your contributions are within a workplace, and then to practice and practice and practice saying it so that it becomes very smooth and easy for you, and you can use it the next time you need it.
Great.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.